Welcome to Gene's Reviews, where I basically do whatever the hell I want. Hello everybody, how are you all doing? You know what? From Goliath to the Guinness Book of World Records, today we're going to look at some of the tallest people in the world. This is from Most Amazing Elite. Now this is a compilation video, and usually with those they end up repeating some of them. So if they do, I'll just speed through them. But let's check this out. I find this stuff really fascinating.
In our number 10 spot today, we have Fyodor Makhnov. Fyodor was born in June of 1878 in what would now be modern-day Belarus. As a child, he began to grow quite quickly, measuring 6'7" when he was just 14 years old.
Wow.
He, of course, needed custom-made clothes and even a custom-made bed, and it is said that his boots were so big that other children could hide in them while playing hide-and-seek. Because of the times he lived in, as well as his exceptional height, at just 16 years old, he began to perform in the circus, where it is said he grew to be 8'2". Someone of this size is going to have quite the appetite. You need a lot of fuel to keep that body going, and it is said that in an average daily breakfast he would eat 20 eggs, 8 loaves of bread, and would drink 2 liters of tea. And that's just for breakfast.
You know what? Even for his height,
approach him to ask if he would sign a
I think that's
contract for
extreme.
ownership of his body after he passed, but he always refused because he was afraid that if he signed the contract, he would be killed. Sadly, he would pass away at quite an early age. In 1912, he passed at just 34 years old. He left behind his wife, who was tall for a woman, but at the time still stood 3 feet and 3 inches shorter than him, as well as 4 children. Guys, before we get into number 9,
8 loaves of
don't
bread
forget to
is
like
crazy.
this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps us
The
out.
20 eggs
so
I can kind of understand, but
spot
8
we have
loaves of
Bernard
bread?
Coyne, also
Wow.
referred to as Bernard the Giant. He was born in Iowa on July 27th, 1897. His true height is still disputed. Some people say he was 8'2", some say he was 8'4", and some say he was as tall as 8'8". And whichever it really was,
They're always
Bernard
going to
was
exaggerate
clearly over
it.
8 feet tall, which, especially in the 1800s, was unbelievable. Bernard's height can be attributed to a rare syndrome called unicoidal infantile gigantism, colloquially known as daddy long leg syndrome. Apparently, Bernard's parents for a while would exhibit their son in order to earn money. They'd put him on display, but eventually they stopped because they feared it might put them in the spotlight of God's wrath. I mean, yeah, no worries. Don't worry about the effect it would have on your kid. Just worry about the wrath of God.
I'd worry
As
more
Bernard got
about
older,
that,
of
but
course,
I'd
people
worry
wanted to
about the
recruit
effect
him
on
for
my
the same
kid
sort of
also.
thing. They wanted him to put himself on display in exchange for money, but he would turn down these offers because he just wanted to live a normal life.
Wow.
Bernard was so tall that during World War I, he was actually rejected by the army due to his tall stature. Like many of the people on this
I
list,
can kinda
Bernard would
understand
pass at
that
quite
because
a young age. In just
probably wouldn't be able to
1921,
move very
Bernard died
fast
at
or
the age
anything.
of 23. In our number 8 spot
23,
today, we
wow.
have Zahn Shichai. Zahn was born in China in the 1840s, but he would later move to England and tour around, known as Chang Wu Gao. Before his move, however, he grew to be 7 feet 9 inches tall, and he was actually appointed as a member of the Emperor's court. His move to England was initially supposed to be just a short trip, but he would go on to stay for 2 years because thousands of people paid 3 shillings just to see him and his tall stature. He went on to tour throughout the rest of Europe as well, and sometimes during his show he would be displayed beside a little person in order to really dramatize just how tall he was, and in 1881 he went on to join P.T. Barnum's circus. Zahn passed away in 1893.
That's about the only job you'd be able to
he
get,
was loved and had intrigued the
being that
attention
tall.
of thousands. His funeral was only attended by 50 of his
You have to
friends.
live.
It is said that since he was so tall,
So-
his coffin measured 8.5 feet long. In our number 7 spot today, we have Adam Rayner. So many of the people on this list started out growing quite tall at young ages, but that couldn't be further from the truth for Adam. In fact, Adam was actually below average height for the beginning of his life, so much so that he was being turned down from the army during World War I because he wasn't tall enough.
Wow.
Adam was born in Austria in 1899, and at his first attempt to join the army, he was only 4'6". He tried to join again the following year, but was rejected.
So something
and at
screwy
19
with the
years old,
pituitary
he
gland.
measured only 4'8". Just a couple of years later, however, at age 21, things would drastically change and he would soon reach a height of 7'1".
Wow.
This fast-paced and late growth spurt caused him some troubles though, because as he grew, his spinal cord curved. Eventually, Adam went on to get surgery to try and stop his pituitary gland from creating more growth hormones, but this did not stop it entirely and merely just slowed the pace at which he grew. His health would continue to decline because of his condition, and it left him blind in one eye, deaf in one ear, and eventually his curved spine left him unable to get out of bed. Adam passed away at the age of 51 years old after reaching a height of 7'8". In our number 6 spot today, we have Agnes MacAskill. Agnes was born in Scotland in 1825, and it is said that he is quite the anomaly because he didn't have any kind of condition that caused him to grow so tall. He just was. And because of the fact that at birth he was so small, doctors weren't sure if he was going to survive. Agnes might not be the tallest man on this list, but he sure wasn't small. He measured at 7'9", but he was also just a massive person with great strength, said to weigh 500 pounds and had the ability to lift a ship's anchor. It is said that Agnes would often receive requests from people who wanted to wrestle him, which is absolutely hilarious, but that one man changed his mind after he shook hands with Agnes, and Agnes continued to shake his hand until it bled. A little dramatic for sure, but I appreciate the effect.
Probably broke his bones.
Agnes joined the circus and would tour many countries before going into real estate and opening a store. In 1863, Agnes passed away as a result of brain fever. In our number 5 spot today, we have Robert Wadlow. Robert was born on February 22nd, 1918, and although he was an average size at birth, by age 5 he was already 5'4". Like, that's almost my height. Imagine an actual toddler
4 inches shorter than me.
The size of a grown-ass man. New definition to the terrible twos. That's just kind of horrifying. Try to put him in a timeout, but you have to like square up.
Yeah.
By 17 years old, he was standing at 8'1", making him one of the, if not the, tallest teenager ever. His huge appetite had him consuming 8,000 calories a day, but being this tall isn't all glitz and glamour, and it can come with some very serious side effects.
Absolutely.
He had trouble walking because of his fast growth, and this required him to have braces on his legs as well as use a walking stick. Unfortunately, an ill-fitted brace would eventually lead to his untimely death. In 1940, Robert received a new leg brace that didn't fit properly, and just 1 week later this brace caused a blister. Seems like a minor inconvenience, but this blister went on to become really infected. This infection very sadly went on to take Robert's life at the early age of just 22 years old.
Probably a blessing in disguise, honestly.
Bates. Anna was born in Nova Scotia in August 1846, and by the time she was 22 years old, she was already standing at a height of 7'6". At age 16, Anna went into show business because it was very clear she was taller than the average female.
The only thing she
began touring around, and in 1865 had a frightening moment at Barnum's Museum when it caught fire and she was too tall to escape through a window. She thought she had met her end because the stairs were on fire, but thankfully she was saved when employees broke the wall and she was lifted out with a crane. In 1871, Anna met another super tall person named Martin Van Buren Bates, who was also known as the Kentucky Giant and who was 7'8". The pair got married and were often exhibited at circuses as the tallest married couple in the world. Anna ended up passing away in 1888 at the age of 41. In our number 3
longer
today,
than
we have
most.
Joseph Edward Beaupre. Joseph is a man who was actually born in my home province of Saskatchewan in 1881, so imagine my shock when I realized that I had never even heard of him before. Joseph's parents were average height, so of course they were shocked when, by age 9, their son had already outgrown them. At the age of 17, he stood at 7'1" and is said to have been able to lift an 800-pound horse. By the time 1904 rolled around, Joseph was 8'3", and he tried to become a cowboy, but realized this probably wasn't the career for him, considering his feet touched the ground while he was riding a horse. At 21, he joined the circus, but as one can imagine, this took quite a toll on him, and it is said that he was also dealing with tuberculosis at the time, which is just crazy. Sadly, the story takes quite a dark turn as, at age 23, after a performance and after coughing up blood, Joseph went unconscious and never woke up again. The circus refused to pay his burial expenses, and his father was unfortunately too poor to afford it, which meant that his body remained with the undertakers, who began displaying it in store windows and museums. Joseph's body would remain with people who never should have had it in the first place until 1989, over 80 years after his death, when it was was finally released to his surviving family members, who then cremated it. In our number 2
Good.
spot today, we have Patrick Cotter O'Brien. Patrick was born in Ireland in January of 1760, and he grew to be 8'1", which made him one of the first people to be known to grow past 8 feet tall.
Wow.
At 18 years old, he began working as a bricklayer because he didn't need a ladder to reach the top of the cottages like the rest of those he worked with. Like many people on this list, Patrick found himself in a life of show business where he just called himself O'Brien. It is said that he had to travel around in a carriage that was made specifically for him because of his size, and one day when this carriage was pulled over by a highwayman, when this guy saw Patrick, he ran the other way because he was terrified of his large stature. Sadly, Patrick's size took quite a toll on his body and eventually led to his death, which occurred on September 8th, 1806, when Patrick was 46 years old. In our number 1 spot today,
Born
we
in
have Arthur Bailey.
1760.
Arthur was born
Wow.
in Sulby, Isle of Man in 1824, and while for the beginning of his life he was average size, in his late teens he suddenly began to grow quite tall, reaching a height of 7'11" and earning the nickname Manx Giant.
That's
Arthur
too
was
tall
on
to
display
even
at
play
many exhibits
basketball
because of
or
his height,
anything.
and
Well,
he
they didn't
traveled to
have it
places
then,
like
but
Manchester, London, and Paris, but suddenly he disappeared. His mother explained that he had passed away and that he was already buried, but people were suspicious because it is said that just a few weeks earlier, his life was insured for $2,000. We still see it today, people committing insurance fraud, so it's not really that far-fetched of an idea, and here's what really happened. Arthur was not dead. He instead had traveled to the United States to join P.T. Barnum's circus. During his time in the circus, he was marketed as Colonel Routh Goshen, the Arabian Giant. It wasn't until his true death in 1889 that his previous life as the Manx Giant was revealed and the whole story was complete.
Alright, starting this off at number 10, we have Brahim Takiula. Now he's actually joint 10th alongside a guy called Morteza, but I could only choose one to be at number 10, I'm afraid, so sorry Morteza, you're still pretty tall though. Born in 1982, Brahim is from Morocco and
this is
stands
more
at
recent.
8'1". He underwent treatment in Paris in 2006 to help treat the tumour that was causing his unstoppable growth. Now thankfully, it worked and the growth hormones in his blood returned to a normal level. Despite this though, Brahim is still famous for apparently having the largest feet on the planet.
Too bad they
at
couldn't do
15
it earlier.
inches, and he actually has specially designed shoes to help support his weight. Alright, next up for our number 9 now, we have Bernard Coyne. Now he was born in 1897 in Iowa, and when he was conscripted into the US Army during World War I, he was measured at being 8'2" tall. Bernard had something called daddy long leg syndrome, which involves his body totally ignoring the release of estrogen that's telling him to stop growing. Bernard died at the age of just 23 from a glandular disorder that left him with a hardening liver. At this point, some reports even put his height closer to 8'4". Alright, next up at number 8 we have Don Kohler. Born in 1925, Don was of normal height until he shot up at 10 years old and eventually reached 8'2" tall. Now if any of you guys watching this remember the 1970s, you might remember Don as the tallest person in the world at that time. What's
These are more
interesting about him
recent.
is that he actually had a twin sister who didn't share his extraordinary height. She remained at 5'9" tall, which meant the two held a world record for the biggest difference in height between two twins at 29 inches. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Vikas Upal from India, who was born in 1986. Although he was never officially measured by Guinness World Records, there have been a number of other organisations that confirmed his height was 8'3", making him the tallest man in India. Over the years there were a number of publications that put his height all the way up to 8'10", which would have put him at the number 2 spot on this list, but most people think that's a bit of an exaggeration.
I think so.
He had huge proportions. His hands were actually said to be 13 inches long and his feet 19 inches, but he did appear to be totally in proportion. Sadly though, Vikas died in 2007 after a failed brain tumour operation. Okay, for our number 6 now guys, we have Sultan Kösen. Born in 1982 in Turkey, Sultan is currently the tallest man in the world, standing at 8
right now
foot and
he's
3
the
inches.
tallest.
Here's a picture of him with the shortest man in the world at that time. Look at the difference. Like others on this list, he actually had a normal childhood until the age of 10, at which point he rocketed over 6 foot tall. His growth was caused by a tumour in his brain and it showed no signs of stopping into adulthood. In 2010, doctors attempted to remove the tumour by focusing radiation at it, and amazingly, it worked. It was a success success. As of 2012, Sultan has officially stopped growing, but nobody seems to be taller than him yet. Right,
again, too bad they couldn't get to it earlier.
Edouard Beaupré. Born in 1881, Edouard is the tallest Canadian on this list and stood at 8 foot 3 inches tall. He was the oldest of 20 children. Yes, 20. At age 9, he was 6 foot 1. That's the same height as me. But it wasn't just his height that made him remarkable. Edouard was also an impressive strongman. At the age of just 17, he reportedly lifted up an 800-pound horse. He also spoke French, English, and 3 Native American languages. He spent the next 6 years touring with a circus before dying from a pituitary gland tumor at the age of 23. Alright, moving on to our number 4 now, we've got Väinö Mailarin. He was from Finland and was once the world's tallest living person. Interestingly, he was also the tallest soldier of all time, as he was part of the Finnish Defence Forces.
Wow.
On multiple occasions throughout his 20s, he was measured at being 7 foot 3 inches tall, but interestingly, Väinö actually underwent a growth spurt in his late 30s and shot up over a foot to 8 foot 3 inches tall. Now, if that wasn't impressive enough, he also apparently had huge hands that spanned the size of a bowling pin. What? Alright, coming in at number 3 now, we have John F. Carroll. This is an interesting one because John's case has been disputed over the years. He was born in 1932 and by age 27 he was measured at exactly 8 foot, but John had a severely disfigured spine, and without it, apparently he would have been 8 foot 7 3/4 inches. Born in Buffalo, New York, he became known as the Buffalo Giant after a growth spurt saw him grow 7 inches in just a few months. He was diagnosed with giantism, and although doctors tried to treat his spine condition, it did get worse, and John had actually shrunk 4 inches by the time he passed away at the age of 37. Okay, next up at number 2 now, we have John Rogan at 8 foot 9 inches. John was born in Tennessee in 1865 and was apparently a normal size up until the age of 13. Then he underwent a massive growth spurt that left him needing crutches to even stand up. By age 17, he couldn't walk at all. Unable to work for a living, John would stand at the train station and sell portraits of himself to curious tourists. He was said to always be friendly and easygoing. Although everybody knew he was probably the tallest man alive at that time, he wasn't officially measured until his death in 1905 and was buried under concrete to stop curious scientists from trying to study him. Alright, and finally, at number 1, we have the tallest...
Number 10, we have Kazam, otherwise known as Shaquille O'Neal. For any of you who have seen that movie, man, oh man, I rewatched it recently and I do not think it holds up. But if there are
I don't think it ever held up.
Please let me know what you think down in the comments. Anyway, back to Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal was born March 6, 1972, and little did his mother know she would be giving birth to one of the most famous basketball players of all time, as well as a modern giant. Shaq clocks in at 7 feet 1 inch, which is 2.16 meters in height, and has quite the list of hilarious pictures comparing his size to other popular celebrities. One of my favorites is a picture of him with A-list comedian Kevin Hart.
I don't think he has a glandular problem though. He's just born tall. That's all there is to it. Because if he had all those problems, his health would be bad, and his health isn't bad. His health is really good.
We all know Kevin is a shorter guy, but next to Shaq, he looks like a tiny villager. Luckily for Kevin, Shaq is just one large friendly giant unless he's on the court. Shaq no longer plays basketball, but is now a sports analyst on NBA-related TV shows, and even though nowadays he's usually seen just sitting at a desk, this man is still a giant. We're going back to the NBA with a basketball superstar, Yao Ming. This famous NBA superstar was born September 12, 1980 in Shanghai, China. Yao Ming's height is an incredible 7 feet 6 inches, or 229 centimeters.
Taller than
this
Shaq.
Giant featherless being has a wingspan of 226 centimeters, which is basically just as tall as he is, and his feet are size 18. Those aren't shoes, those are frickin' water skis. Before coming to play for the NBA, he played for the Shanghai Sharks in the Chinese Basketball Association, and was then drafted to the NBA in 2002 to the Houston Rockets, where he there played until 2011. In February of 2017, Ming was elected as the chairman of the Chinese Basketball Association. Now, there is also a documentary titled The Year of Yao, filmed during his rookie year with the Rockets, as well as a book he co-wrote with NBA analyst Rick Butcher titled Yao, A Life in Two Worlds. So if you want to get to know him a little bit more, check those out. If you want to see how this giant dominated the court, I'm sure you can find tons of old Rocket games all over the internet. At number...
Well, all the other ones we'd already seen before, so I really find that stuff fascinating. It makes me sad, though, to think, you know, their life had to be so hard, so much pain. I mean, at least they, didn't have to live through it for so long, most of them. But anyways, let me know what you thought of that in the comments down below. Now, how about a joke? When people die and start heading to the light, what they don't realize is they've already been reincarnated as a moth. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.